It's Wednesday, August 22nd, 2012. We are at the Dallas Museum of Art. The following interview is part of the DMA's History of Contemporary Art Collecting in Dallas Research Project, funded by the Texas Fund for Curatorial Research. I am Leigh Arnold, project researcher at the DMA, and I will be speaking with Mr. Brian Gibb, artist, independent curator, gallery owner, and co-creator of the publication Art Prostitute. Thank you, Brian, for agreeing to be interviewed as part of the History of Contemporary Art Collecting in Dallas project.
Sure thing.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. You were born and raised in Texas. Can you tell us a little bit about how you made your way to Dallas and what that road was like?
I graduated from high school in '95 and then went to the University of Texas at Arlington, where I studied for like 3 semesters. And I went to I just decided I was going to transfer to UNT. Like, I guess I wasn't feeling UTA for, a number of reasons, mainly that it's UTA. And I went to UNT, and that was like in '97. So that was kind of like, at that moment, that was sort of the height of good, bad in Denton. And so that was, to me, what was my first introduction to what would later become actual important contemporary art, especially in Dallas. I mean, Eric Swinson being like the shining star of that group, and then people like Micah Yarborough and Elliot and people like that. But seeing that like firsthand, I was like, oh wow, this is like, it wasn't like anything I'd ever seen before. Like, and it was people who were students and things like that. And I think that was one of the things that really impacted me. It was kind of like students were making things that seemed like super legit to me. Like when you look at something, you think like, that looks real. Something like that, And so I just kept going on. I studied drawing and painting and communication design kind of simultaneously until I got to a point where Vincent Falsetta was like, okay, you've got to pick a team. You can't do both. I mean, you'd be splitting your focus, all that stuff. And so I actually decided to finish my degree in communication design, because to me, I kind of knew that my interest in art and studio practice and making things and all that stuff was going to continue on with me regardless. So I thought, well, graphic design seems like something that makes a whole lot of sense, in terms of like, pursuing it and all that sort of thing. So I did, and I guess it was like my second to last semester in school, and I met Mark Searcy, who he and I kind of had a lot in common. Like, we were both skateboarders, we both liked art, we both made art. Art very much influenced what we did on a design level, and vice versa. So we had that in common, and we just started talking about doing a publication. And at the time, like, there was this sort of thing that was happening where artists were being commissioned to do things like sneakers and apparel lines and stuff like that, and obviously the crossover between like art and skateboarding and skateboard graphics, and people like Ed Templeton and Evan Hecox, artists like that were really big influences. Somebody, it was like, wow, they've got a fine art thing going on, but they also do these other things. And I maintained an interest in both. Like, all of it was so exciting, like the thought of like making a t-shirt or making an object, like seemed, just really fascinating to me. And so we were like, you know what, nobody's really covering this type of thing. This sort of cross section between, where art and design meet and actually do really well together. And so we're like, let's do it, and the name was sort of, obviously, tongue-in-cheek kind of thing. And it was kind of something like, and I guess at that time, like, read Fight Club and all that sort of thing, and it sort of felt like it was really kind of slightly hostile and in people's faces, and which many years later I wish it hadn't been so much, because I feel like it sort of like kicked us out of a few opportunities and things like that. Everybody loved what we did, blah blah blah. So we graduated, started the publication, did it for a year, like out of my house and Mark's apartment. Like, my garage was the distribution center, and Mark's apartment was where we put all the books together. And then we opened a gallery in 2004, just off the square of the same name, and then just started doing shows, but like crazy shows, like like stuff that should not have been happening like on a commercial gallery level in Denton, Texas. Like that's the thing. Like, and so it was, I mean, shows with people like Evan Hecox and Cody Hudson and Mike Giant and Dalek and Shepard Fairey and, you know, like pieces, group shows with Ryan McGinnis and, you know, those things that had like no business happening there. And bringing these artists to Denton to hang out, you know, like, I mean, we'd try and fly people in for openings whenever we could. If their schedule permitted, we'd figure out a way to buy a ticket. And, you know, the hotels there, or I guess the hotels at the time, like, you know, are fairly inexpensive. So, you know, we could actually go, yeah, and we'll put you up here at the Motor Inn or whatever, you know, like, I mean, you know, but it was kind of like, Denton's much more like cosmopolitan now than it was then, for sure. But yeah, I mean, there wasn't a lot of choices, but it was great. And we started to get like kind of like Dallas started to take note of what we were doing. But, you know, at that point, like kind of, I mean, not to sound like some kind of, you know, crazy egomaniac or something, but the world was starting to take notice. You know, it was like an international audience of people who were buying the publication online, or stores, you know, from France, like emailing and saying, hey, we saw your thing in Giant Robot when we were in San Francisco, we'd like to, you know, things like that. And it was pretty mind-blowing. I mean, like, because we were just two guys doing this thing, and so that was our focus. And that took so much energy to produce something at that level and really take the time and care and all that stuff. And obviously we were promoting it and things like that, but there's only so much two people can do. And I mean, like, literally we worked like almost, it was like every waking hour, you know, was either spent doing something, whether it was like hanging a show, you know, like it was all about what we were doing, like whether it was the gallery, the book, an event, whatever, commercial projects. I mean, because like commercial work, like client work, was a lot of times what paid for things to happen, you know. And so we just like took whatever we made and put it right back into it, and we sort of reached a level that we just couldn't. We were like, okay, this is as far as we can take it here. So it's time to go. So we, you know, our lease was only 2 years. So in the summer of 2006, we moved to Dallas. You know, we met a woman who introduced us to the property owner, and she's a huge art collector. So, I mean, Susan Reese is the woman I'm speaking about. And she was like, yeah, this sounds great. I mean, she'd seen, you know, some of the stuff that we'd done, and you know, and so we ended up here, and then, you know, started to, you know, plug away.
What was the main decision in ending up in Deep Ellum of all places, especially in 2006?
I think that it had a lot to do with the Reese family. The Reeses were also the people who happened to own the space that Angstrom Gallery was in. So without knowing that going into it, like I didn't know that, you know, like once I found that out, like that just made a lot of sense to me. But I just think that, I mean, how rare, I mean, most people, like if you take like the Design District or something like that, like I don't know any property owners there that really care. I mean, they obviously care about being paid and things like that. And I'm not, I mean, that may not be the case, but like, you know, for everybody, but I've heard that enough. I mean, it's very much like this sort of very hard line, and I feel like with Susan, it felt like, I mean, you know, obviously, I mean, we wanted, I mean, we wanted to, like, it was like a transaction, you know, we were participants in a, you know, this business transaction or whatever, but it was like they cared, you know what I mean? Like they cared about what went on there, and they cared about the things that we were doing, and that just seemed like, that just made the most sense to me, because I guess we'd spent 2 years when we were in Denton. We had, you know, it was kind of the same guy. It was this weird little dude named John Adams, which is so funny. Like, but he owned like a cash register business, and he was just this funny little man, you know, like, and you know, and we just went in there, and he said, look, you know, the rent's $1,200 a month, and it's due on the 1st and late after the 3rd, and as long as you pay me my $1,200, we won't have any problems. Like, and that was it. Like, you know, then the finish out and stuff like that, like, you know, we had to do all that ourselves. I mean, and like literally that was like learning to hang sheetrock and, you know, all that stuff. And then we move here and it's like we meet somebody that's like, hey, you know what, I know you guys are working hard and like you're really doing something that's impacting culture. We'd love to have you here, and you know, we're going to work with you to make this happen, you know. And that was just crazy to us, like, and I think that at the time it was just like, wow, like somebody who cares. Like, we'd never, I mean, there's so many people that we'd met prior to that you know, it was like they wanted to do something with us, but there was, you know, and it was kind of like, oh yeah, we're going to help you out in this way, but really the help we were getting wasn't much help at all. I mean, you know, because we ended up just, I mean, you know, it was kind of like these things where, you know, you're getting these small breaks here and there, but this was like somebody who gave us a huge, giant break and made it something that we just couldn't say no to. And it was like, not even like that it was this great thing that we couldn't say no to. It was just like, we didn't want to say no. It was like, we didn't want to go anywhere else because these people weren't there. So that was that.
Backing up to when you had Art Prostitute in Denton, what was the kind of reception from Denton and anybody that was living in that area to your gallery space, to your publication? It seems like Art Prostitute, as you said, is kind of a polarizing name.
Yeah.
It seems more appropriate in Deep Ellum than Denton. So can you tell me a little bit about what it was like when you opened the gallery there and the kind of reception you received?
Well, I mean, it was great. I mean, you know, I feel like at that point, you know, we were a few years removed from the last Good Bad thing. And so Good Bad, I mean, people are still talking about Good Bad. It was a great thing. You know, and so we were sort of like looked at as the thing that was going to come in and pick up where they left off. Not take its place by any means, but just pick up where it left off. Like something culturally significant that's happening in Denton. And a lot of people were, I mean, everybody was really supportive. I mean, yes, like, I mean, it was crazy. I mean, we got to a point where, I mean, it was like, you know, it was like, there's the Art Prostitute guys, or there's one of the Art Prostitute guys. You know, like that kind of thing. And it was like a level of ghetto superstardom that, like, I don't think I would ever see again in my life. Just because, like, I was the right age for it, you know. I mean, I was like this young dude, and like, you know, doing this thing, and it was crazy. Like, I mean, people loved it. I mean, they loved what it was. They loved what it stood for. I feel like we were Denton is always, I mean, I guess like current residents of Denton or whatever will probably refute this point, but it is definitely a place where there's so much potential all the time, but there's very few people that fully realize their potential for one reason or another, be it pot or drinking or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, it's like a lot of really great ideas that get bounced around, but like there is a certain level of slacking that goes on. But that's just a college town, you know what I mean? Like, that's that. I mean, there are people who don't, and they're really amazing musicians and all that stuff, but, you know, and so it was like, when we started talking about it, we realized, like, we sound exactly like all these other people that, like, go, yeah, man, I'm going to start this co-op with whatever, you know, like, and, you know, we're going to make hemp products, and it's going to be amazing. We're going to change the world. It's going to be like a industrial revolution or whatever, you know, like, and it's just this kind of thing that these big, huge ideas. So we started talking about this, and everybody, like, no doubt, like, chalked it up to that type of thing, and then we just did it. And I remember there's this like one sort of super defining moment for me. Toy Machine, which is a skateboard company, you know, like skateboard companies that go on like tours and stuff like that, you know, that basically they just go and demo at like skate parks or whatever, and Toy Machine is owned and run by Ed Templeton, who's an artist who was in the Beautiful Loser show, blah blah blah. So a big deal to me, you know, like, and I went to this thing and I told him about what we were going to do, and then in this conversation realizing, damn it, he thinks that I'm just some dude who's talking about something that's never going to happen. Shit. You know, like, I mean, and that was just it, you know, and I thought, like, that totally sucks. Like, I have got to change that, because there's a trend here, you know. And so I went to Mark and I said, hey man, I was talking to Ed Templeton, he was really psyched on it, like, but I don't think he thinks that we're going to actually do it. So we definitely have to do it. And for me, like, even though he didn't come out and say it, it was just like everything about the exchange sort of was like, cool, man, you know, like, you do that, you know, and I thought, like, God, that seems slightly patronizing to me, and it disappoints me, but I get it, you know, because everybody says I'm going to do something, and then they don't. So...
Was this when you were just doing the publication?
Yeah, this is like this is before the first issue had come out. And so I was like, okay. So we like did it, you know, and we interviewed a couple of friends of mine, this guy Matt Hawthorne, who's a photographer, and my friend Will, who's also a DJ, and he was doing like, I mean, he's just like a, you know, kind of like a DJ artist, like does like apparel stuff, like he's just, you know, good. And then this guy Jordan Stone, who was like this insane Flash developer at the time, like was doing these crazy websites, like it was called SoFake.com. Like that dude is like total like genius, you know. Like, and so Mark had kind of brought him into the mix, and then I was like, we need like some big dude, and I was like, let's try and interview Evan Hecox, like, because hands down, like, still one of my favorite artists like ever. I mean, what all the work he did for Chocolate Skateboards is just like, it's all good. Like, I've never seen anybody whose output is entirely good, but he's one of them. And you know, and so, you know, I just emailed Evan, and he was like, yeah, sure. So we drove out to Colorado, and you know, we photographed his house and studio and all that stuff, did the interview, came back, transcribed it, you know, and then like put the first book together, and it was 48 pages. It's like a self-cover thing, came in this like slipcase, which was like chipboard, which we elected to not have printed because we were going to hand stamp all of them, like, you know, like, and there was like, and we also like were seduced by the slightly more cost, you know, just slight increase in cost of printing 5,000 things instead of 2,500. So we're like, we should do that. Look at that savings, you know, like that kind of thing. Like, so I mean, it was just like. So we get 5,000 of these things made, and we're hand stamping them, and like we have this. So we got a, you know, it's like a slipcase. So we need to keep the contents in there somehow. So we got these bands, these craft bands, like cut. You know, they actually had someone cut them for us, which is a shocker because I'm surprised we didn't just get the X-Acto out and do it ourselves. You know, and so we take these bands, we band it, and we're like using like spray mount. You know, like so we just, you know, hit the end of it and tack it that way. And then I'm realizing as, you know, I'm 500 or so into this deal, like, my lungs feel terrible. Like, this is awful. Like, you know, and I had, like, the little SARS mask on or whatever, you know, but I didn't have, like, a true ventilator. But it was just like, this is awful. Let's get a little sticker or something. You know, and so we had to, I mean, this thing, you had to handle it so many times to put it together. You know, it was just, like, massive, like, labor of love or whatever. But we had nothing but time on our hands and, like, tons of ambition, so we just, like, went for it. And so after that, we just like put a bunch into the car. Like, Mark got like a Nissan Quest like minivan, and we loaded all these magazines into it. And our friend Kevin, who owned a skateboard shop that I rode for in college, he you know, he printed some shirts for us, and you know, so we took our shirts and everything, and we like drove to California, and we were there. We were going to interview Dave Kinsey and Shepard Fairey and Isabel Samaras, like, so we're basically gonna like, we're gonna have a release party in Colorado, and then we were gonna go to California, and we were gonna like start in San Diego, and then just drive up to San Francisco and then come home. So it was crazy, like it was an insane deal.
How did you choose the artists that you were going to feature and interview?
I think it was just like people that we liked, you know, like people that we liked for a really long time, and it made it a lot easier to get, like, once we had that first one out, because we had that first one out, we like sent it to people, and they're like, yeah, I'll totally do this. Like, this is awesome. Holy crap, this is great. You know, like, let's do it. I mean, because before in the abstract, it doesn't work as well. Like, people are concerned, you know, especially like, you know, reproduction. They want to make sure that things look good. It's not just some stupid zine that you made at Kinko's, whatever. You know, like, if they're going to put their name on it, they wanted it to be good. So that was our thing. Like, so we sent them out, and everybody was like, yeah, we'll totally do this. And so we, you know, when we were in California, we went to Giant Robot, and actually we went to Studio Number 1, which at the time was Black Market or whatever. It was like Shepard and Dave's like commercial design studio. And we went there, and we met David Cho, and David Cho introduced us to Eric Nakamura, who's the owner of Giant Robot, which was a magazine that we totally loved, and a store that was amazing. And So he bought like 20 copies from us, like, and it was pouring rain and everything, like, because we went to David's opening like the night after we were at, that's so many Davids. Dave Kinsey was having a show. That's where we met David Cho, and then the following night was David Cho show at Giant Robot. So we went there, and Eric was like, "Yeah, you know, I'll buy 20 copies," and I was like, "What?" And it was like a first like real sale, you know, like wholesale thing that we'd made because we didn't have distribution at that time. And I thought, 20 copies, we're gonna burn through those 5,000. This is gonna be great, you know. Like, I mean, like, seriously, like we were convinced that this was just every place we were going to go to was going to buy 20 copies, and it was going to be awesome. And he wrote us a check right on the spot, you know, which I thought was cool. You know, of course, it didn't, you know, really go that way. I mean, the release party that we had in Colorado was sort of lame, like, and then I realized, like, wow, man, we gotta like build the brand recognition up here because clearly people aren't getting our genius or whatever, you know. Like, I mean, like, you know, it was kind of like, oh, we've really got to try. So while we were in LA, I went to New Image Art, and they were having a show there. And at the time, like, New Image was, you know, a really small gallery space, probably no bigger than the room that we're in right now. And I saw Ed Templeton there, and I had the thing in my hand. And so I just went up to him and I said, "Hey, Ed, do you remember me? I met you at the skate park. I was going to do that magazine or whatever." And he's like, "Yeah." And I like gave it to him, and he looked at it. And he like took the band off, looked at it, had like fold out posters in it. Like, it was sick. Like, I mean, and he just looked at me, and I could see how stunned he was. He was stunned. That was the look of a stunned man. And he just looks at me and he goes, "Holy shit, dude, you fucking did it." You know, like, and that was it, you know. And I thought, I did. Because I told you I was going to do it. You know, you know what I mean? Like, I was just like, and that was like, to me, like, probably even still, like, definitely one of the moments that really stuck out, you know, but because that was like a, you know, it was kind of like somebody who I really respected, who, you know, obviously, you know, was uncertain of my follow through or whatever, and then to get that sort of like such a great response, like that like was fuel for probably the next year, just that, like, just going off that, like, that exchange. And and what I felt was, you know, just meeting all these artists that I'd known for a really long time, like known their work and stuff like that, but actually meeting them and having that sort of exchange, like, wow, this thing that you're doing is actually really great, you know, keep doing it, was like encouraging beyond belief. And then, you know, and as I look back on it, I mean, it seems, you know, like, it just gets me excited for, you know, the next publishing effort that I'll undertake, you know, like, which will be better because I won't have all the mistakes.
At what point in this process did you decide you needed to open a bricks and mortar space as a representation of
I think that,
prostitute?
I mean, it was just a year later. So from 03 to 04, you know, we just did the thing, and then, you know, we were just kind of walking around. I mean, Mark and I spent like most waking hours together, you know, 6 if not 7 days a week. So we were walking around and just kind of sort of imagining what it would be like to have a actual space, you know, where we could do everything we needed to do. And it also felt like we were going to work, you know, like, as opposed to just waking up and rolling out of our bed and being there, you know. Like, I mean, like, it was really liberating in that sense of, you know, breaking up live work. I mean, the whole live work thing, like, you know, I feel like gets over romanticized sometimes. You know, how great would it be to not have to leave your house? And it's like, it can suck super bad to be in your house at all times. I mean, if you have structure outside your house, that's a step, you know, like, I mean, but I think that, like, having that, like, actual physical space, and I also felt like it gave us, like, this, you know, we had, like, a actual commercial address, you know, like, that was huge. I mean, it was like, you know, this is where it's happening. Like, people can come to this place, and, you know, we're here, and we're accessible, and, you know, we have all these other things that we want to offer. I mean, because as excited as we were about what we were doing, we were more excited about what everybody else was doing. So there are all these clothing companies and other magazines, and, you know, like, great, like, small independent book publishers and all the stuff that we were interested in and that we wanted to, you know, like support in the same way that they were supporting us by telling a store owner that they're in about what we, you know, whatever. Like, so, you know, we had this presentation, these two big long tables in the middle of the space that, you know, had like, I mean, The Believer and, you know, like all these like great publications and apparel projects like The Quiet Life, which was out of LA, and Stax, which was another Southern California-based clothing brand. And, you know, so we had like a really small selection of apparel. I mean, we carried like pretty much like full lines by those guys, but, you know, there were only a handful of companies that we really, you know, were like, man, these guys are really doing it right, you know. And, you know, and then we'd have like small little objects, and, you know, when vinyl toys kind of came into the thing, we started to have those, and, you know, just stuff that people could buy when they couldn't afford art, you know, like something that people felt like, I can buy this and feel like, you know, I'm contributing, you know, I'm a part of it, you know, like, because I'm helping these guys out or whatever.
What was your first exhibition at Art Prostitute in Denton?
It was called Roll Call. It was a show of all the, so we put out 4 books at that point of all the artists that had been in all the issues up to that point. So, you know, it had everybody in it. And that was like, you know, Ryan McGinnis, Shepard Fairey, Dave Kinsey, Jeff Soto, Isabel Samaras. Like, I mean, just like Evan Hecox, like everybody was in it. Like, I don't think we missed anybody. Pretty sure we got everybody.
Can you describe for us a typical opening at Art Prostitute in Denton?
It was, I mean, obviously, I mean, the space wasn't super huge. I think our exhibition space was probably about 1,000 square feet. You know, it was long, and, you know, it was kind of a shotgun type thing. It wasn't like super narrow, but yeah, it would just be packed, like, I mean, just like sardines.
People of all types, or was it?
You know,
college students?
It was mostly college students, but, you know, like all the art professors and people like that, you know, they'd show up. Like, you know, obviously Vincent Falsetto would be there. He and his wife are great. You know, they seem to go to everything. You know, like Bert Finger. I mean, him and Missy live in Denton, so they would come sometimes. You know, like I feel like Vernon Fisher came once, maybe. I don't know. I can't really remember. But, you know, like Robert Jessup. You know, he'd stop in on occasion. Annette Lawrence. You know, I mean, we had like a really good, strong kind of like presence of like art faculty there, which conversely the design people never came. Like our instructors or whatever, but they very rarely came, which I thought was weird. But at the same time, like both Mark and I were, I don't know, like I was kind of not really like I mean, like I was a good student, like I was good at what I did or whatever, but I was not into the way in which I felt they were trying to shape me, and I made no bones about that, you know. So I think that was kind of an issue. Like, for instance, after my final portfolio review, I had found out that I had passed my review, and I grabbed my portfolio, looked him right in the face, and threw it in the garbage. You know, like, I mean, so like, you know, like I'm sure they weren't like super stoked on me, but you know, there were a couple of people in the department, like Eric Ligon was one of the people that always sort of stood, you know, kind of like they really did it, they really did something, you know, like, and I'm really friendly with. There's just like a couple of people, you know, obviously there's going to be some kind of static or whatever. But later on, the funny thing is that when we started doing like speaking engagements, because we were sort of like rising in like the art world and the design world, because, you know, thing was, you know, winning awards and stuff like that, you know, and so it was like, you know, we're kind of, you know, and so I remember like this probably being the other really great vindication on the design side was seeing my name as a keynote speaker on a poster on one of the faculty members' doors, in which I did not really get along with, and I thought, yeah, that's right, that's my name on your door. So that was a great moment for me. You know, but not many people get that, you know. So I'm definitely grateful that happened at least once in my life.
How did things kind of change when you moved to Dallas with the gallery? What was the audience at openings and the reception?
It was, I mean, we would have people come from Denton. You know, we had a handful of like diehards. I mean, these are like students like who were studying art or whatever, who were really into, you know, a lot of the work that we were showing, and they were buying work, like and very smartly buying work, because at that time, you know, you could get a daily painting for $650, and you cannot get that anymore. You know, you can't even come close to it. Like, I mean, like at a minimum, like entry level for his work is probably at this point around $4,000 or something like that for a really small thing. So, and he's also not making work that really looks like that anymore either. You know, so I mean, we had those people, and at this point, like I didn't really understand, like, you know, what it was to. I guess what it was to be a contemporary art gallery. I don't think I'd fully grasped that yet. I didn't really understand like how things worked between galleries and museums and stuff like that. I mean, and so that took some adjusting to. And because thinking to myself, like we very rarely had people from Dallas come to Denton, and at the time, like I would really like admonish them for that, and the press, or I'd say, people missing out, I can't believe this. And then I realized that's a far drive. It's kind of a beating, you know, like, you know, and because I had to go back to, you know, I mean, yeah, obviously you go back and forth for a little bit, you know, and I thought, yeah, I get it. Okay, good deal. We're in Dallas now. So,
were there any key moments where you realized, okay, I'm an art gallery owner. I'm selling art. This is. Yeah,
I think. Probably the first moment, because that was the thing, CAD formed, that was another thing. Like I got there and there was Dallas Art Dealers Association, which I'm sure I would have become a member of had CAD not been formed. And so I had been going to some of the CAD galleries, like PD&B places, you know, like not all of them. I mean, I didn't know all of them at that point. I mean, obviously, you know, I was familiar with Dun & Brown, Conduit, Marty Walker, places like that, and I got a call and they said, hey, we're forming this new Art Dealers Association, would you like to come to a meeting? And I came to the meeting, and you know, I remember we were at Conduit, and we're all sitting in the circle, and it was, you know, it was like basically like, I mean, everybody that was a founding member of CAD was there. And that's who we started with. And so at that point, like being invited to do that, I can't really say when that, I mean, I know it was in 2000, it was either 2006 or 2007, but I'd had some shows under my belt, like, and I imagine that most of these people had been to my space at one time or another.
And this was still Art Prostitute.
Yeah, it was still Art Prostitute at that point. And so, I mean, and obviously, like, you know, in this meeting, we're like, so, well, you know, obviously, you know, we're going to do this and this, but, you know, we're going to have to hire somebody to design our logo. And I was like, all right, stop right there. You don't have to do that at all, because I'll do it. Like, and because I thought to myself, like, that is the last thing I'm going to leave in charge of somebody else, you know. So, you know, and that was, you know, and then I think that my contribution to CAD at that point became much more important, just on that level. Later on, the art type of stuff and all that would sort of catch up to that. But I feel like, and they didn't know that going in. You know, they didn't realize that. I mean, obviously they knew about our parts and all that stuff, but I guess they didn't realize like the scope of the things that we were capable of. You know, in terms of like branding or whatever. You know, they had no idea. And so that was kind of cool, actually, to me, because I thought, well, that means that we're here for art, and we're not here because they want us to design a bunch of free stuff for them. So that was like a realization that I had, because they're looking me right in the face like, who can do this? You know, and I thought, like, they have no idea. Like, that's awesome. I'm here for a real reason. And then we formed the organization, you know, we put out the first art guide, and, you know, and we did like a couple of CAD art fairs, you know, which were sort of like brand building type things that, you know, I was in charge of both of those from the marketing and PR side. But the moment, and this was like the museum sort of moment, where I got my first, like, I mean, it's not like acquisition or anything. That's so hard to do anyway. Like, I've come to realize that, like, crazy. But but it was the DMA Art Ball, and I'd heard of this. and I was like, man, I would love to do something like that. Like, I feel like these are people that might, you know, like see something and actually patronize the gallery. Like, how amazing would that be? Like, that didn't seem like out of the scope of possibility. And so I got a call from Laura Elcock, and Laura and Nancy Hanley were kind of like in charge of the art that year.
The auction, kind of.
Yeah. So they were going, and nobody's really done this since, like, not in the way that they did. But they were going like gallery to gallery and really spending time, you know, like looking at things, asking questions, all that stuff. Like, and they came by, and I don't even think I was expecting them the first time. And I had it was a 4-person show that I had up, and there was a artist in it named Zachary Rossman, and Zachary had you know, all these really great kind of like small works, and which I would later go on to find that Nancy Hanley was a huge fan of small works. And she was just like, I mean, I don't think that she really had any expectation going into it, like, you know, would I see, you know, whatever. And so Laura and Nancy were just like, you know, these are great. Like, you know, they really loved this artist Mel Cadell's drawings, and Stephen Hopwood Lewis and Zachary, and Zachary had this shelf of little objects. They were like these little bottles that he had taken these drawings on vellum and then like put them in the bottle, and then they'd expanded in the bottle. They were great. Like, and then he had made this sort of soft sculpture. It was like this figure that was called I think it was called Becoming Black Mountain or something like that. Like, I mean, it was just really great work. And Nancy, you know, came up to me, and she's, you know, looking at the shelf, and she goes, well, I'll take it. And I said, you'll take what? And she goes, all of it. I want all of these things, you know, like, and I thought, you want all of them, like the whole thing, you know? And she's like, yeah. And I was like, that's awesome. You know, like, you know what I mean? And like, I was sort of like, I wanted to be really, you know, I was trying to contain myself because I didn't want to look like, you know, I was too earnest or whatever, you know. But I was really excited because it wasn't like at that time like the biggest individual sale I'd ever had or anything like that, but it really meant a lot because I knew who Nancy Hanley was, and I knew why she and Laura were here, and the fact that, you know, they're asking for a donation, this was kind of a new thing, but they were also buying stuff for themselves, you know, and I kind of felt like, man, that's really great. Like, that so rarely happens. It's sort of like, give us this thing, please, thank you, you know, like, and that's the transaction typically. And it was like, they were like, you know, really, I mean, and they really wanted to see lots of stuff, and we went through this whole process of, you know, like, what should we donate, you know, and they were looking at things, and, you know, like, and then Nancy actually ended up buying the piece that we donated, you know, which I was like, that's cool too, you know. And so that was like a really huge moment for me, and I think that that's probably, you know, on that side of things, one of still like the thing that really stands out. I mean, obviously, like, I mean, I feel like sales are at this point, sales are still really great. If you get like a big one or whatever, that's awesome, but most of the time they're not as meaningful. I mean, like, financially they're meaningful, but in terms of like any kind of real connection or something like that, like, that was one of the things. And you know, and you know, Barry Whistler, you know, had told me sort of a similar story, like, but many years ago, about, you know, he had this big painting in a show, and Nancy and Tim purchased it, and that was like the biggest thing, you know. I mean, that was like a massive deal to him, and I just think it's really interesting that, you know, like, I mean, just the way that people talk about those two and Nancy, like, in that way, like, that story seems to come up all the time for a bunch of different people. And that's why I think that, I mean, she was so supportive, and I think that that's why, like, you know, like, people dismiss her the most, you know, like, I mean, she was great, you know, like, I mean, that was like probably one of the sadder days, I think, so. Definitely.
So how did you get from art prostitute to the current gallery trust?
You know, Mark and I, we, you know, it's hard doing what we were doing, and It was about 2007, and Mark kind of came to me, and I could sort of tell, like, things were, like, I mean, there was a lot of, I mean, it was hard. Like, I can't tell you how hard it is. But there was a lot of weight on him, and I could just see it on his face. And I would try and talk to him about it, but I felt like he was really trying. I felt like it was probably something he thought he'd just power through. But I could just sort of see that wasn't how it was going to go down. But I just sort of let it run its course, and then one day I hadn't seen Mark in a few days, and he sent me a note basically saying, like, I think I want to move to Portland and just kind of start a new life and all that sort of thing. And and so we just sort of went through the steps. It was pretty easy. I mean, it wasn't like a crazy thing. And then but I thought at that point, like, that right at that moment, like, I thought, like, I think that's it. Like, it very much like a a band or something like that. I think that it's time to just sort of reinvent yourself, as opposed to finding a new front man or whatever. Not to say that, like, Mark was like a front man or anything. Like, I think we were both, like, sort of equal parts in that way. But like Van Halen is a total joke with Sammy Hagar versus David Lee Roth. I mean, like, that's like the best example of how something can be really great and then suck just because you switched out one part. And so I kind of thought, like, we can just, not that I think what we'd be doing at that point on would suck, but it just would be different. I felt like that was also something that we had built, and now there's no we. And so, like, that was the moment where I just said, okay, that's it, change the name. And the name was pretty simple. Like, I was going through, like, a old logo book or whatever, and it was like something like the Public Trust Theater Company of Greater Waukesha, Wisconsin, or something like that. Some weird, crazy long thing. And I thought, the Public Trust, that's cool. Let's use that. Sounds good. It's catchy. Sounds bookish. Like, it's the polar opposite of Art Prostitute, like, in every way. So, yeah, and then and that was it. I mean, it was pretty, I just changed everything up, like. But the crazy thing about Art Prostitute, and, like, a lot of things that people don't really realize, is that, like, I literally just, like, left the room with that deal. You know what I mean? Like, it was like, it wasn't like this, I just quit. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't send out a press release. Nothing. Like, you go on that website, it's still there. The last update was like 2000. You know what I mean? Like, there's just, and then it just stops. It wasn't like, farewell everybody, or anything like that. Like, there was none of that. Like, I just, like, and I thought, like, that, to me, like, that seemed the best way to just end it. Like, there's no ceremony or anything like that. It was just like, man, that's it. Like, it was like, we just never played again, It's like Neutral Milk Hotel. It was like a very Neutral Milk Hotel way to stop things.
Or the Sopranos blackout.
Yeah, like, I didn't go to, tour with REM or anything. I just said, what, we're done.
Did you get people constantly asking you, when's the next issue coming out?
Oh yeah, people still ask me that. Like, and there was this moment in time, and I don't think the economy was right for it. I thought about a refire, and then I just said, no, I'm not gonna do it. I started the process and then stopped it. Like, and because I was just like, I can't do it. Like, and I still feel that way. Like, I think at some point I may, like, go back and make a tiny little archive or something like that. But that's not, like, top on the list of things to do by any stretch.
Apart from the Public Trust being your own kind of venture, how is it distinguished from the Art Prostitute, if at all?
I'm not calling her a prostitute. That's the first thing. Primarily, it's I mean, I feel like it's more rooted in the contemporary art world, like what I would consider the legitimate I don't know. That seems so stupid. I mean, it's so stupid. Like, the whole thing sometimes seems really dumb to me. But it's in this, like, this vein of, instead of just putting shows on, like, how do we build careers? How do we make like more lasting marks on culture, you know? And I feel like before we were just, I was younger, you know, like you just do things differently. I just happened to be doing a lot of things, you know, like, and I had like this sort of level of energy and things like that that, you know, that I don't have. I mean, I still do a lot, you know, but it's just like, it's just a different, it's more methodical, I think, you know, and in the way that, you know, I'm trying to go about things. I mean, obviously, like, you know, I've made tons of mistakes, you know, like, I mean, broken tons of eggs and, you know, and all that, and, you know, and I'm trying to sort of, I mean, you know, because there's a lot of financial things that, like, burdens that came with doing Art Prostitute. I mean, like, you know, where we had, like, such a huge cost to doing that, and it was like, you know, sometimes we couldn't pay for those things right away, so we really had to, like, you know, sort of chip away at them, like, you know, but it, like, at the time, like, you know, that hardship that we created seemed worth it, you know, but now, like, I don't necessarily think that's the case, you know, like, and so I feel like it's just like a, you know, like a slightly more responsible way of going through, you know, like, I mean, it's trying to sort of, you know, not play it safe, but just like, you know, just like work a little smarter, you know, like, I mean, and instead of just like piling a bunch of hours with all this crazy energy and all that stuff, but, you know, just picking better spots, you know, like realizing that maybe, you know, like just, it's like more about like efficiency, things like that, you know, like trying to do things that have a longer, you know, that take a little longer, you know, like the boat's going a little slower, but I think that's okay, you know, like, you know, trying to work with artists and really like put them, because I think in the early stages, I feel like now with the art world, the meteoric rise is kind of not really happening like it used to, and I think that's okay. I actually would prefer that, because I feel like if our trajectory is more like this, you know, and less like this, you know, like, then the chances are, like, the, you know, when it dips or plateaus or whatever, we're not going to be like on such a high wire. I think that's the, you know, that to me is probably the biggest difference in terms of like just what the end goal is, and it's not about just like doing this one thing at this one moment in time, but it's mainly like this long-term sort of thing.
How do you see the gallery, your gallery, fitting into kind of the broader context of Dallas's contemporary art community?
I think that like at the most basic level, probably the, you know, the sort of democracy that of art that I believe in. I don't show the most expensive art in Dallas by a long shot, you know, like, and, you know, it's in the last couple of years, like, have been, you know, a little slower in terms of like, you know, exhibitions and things like that, but I feel like at this point, like, I'm building up to something much bigger, so it's been a little quieter, you know, like, you know, there's been like maybe 6 shows a year instead of 9, you know, like, it's been a, you know, it's just been a slower, much slower moving boat, and that was partly because, like, you know, I didn't want to bleed out during the fall, you know, the economy and all that stuff. I mean, that had something to do with it, and I also wanted to, like, you know, it's like I feel like it's this sort of change, you know, it's like, I mean, obviously it was like a huge, massive change, you know, that everybody went through in 2008, but I think that, like, I mean, I feel that art is for everyone, but not in that way of like everybody's an artist, or, you know, like open mics are usually terrible for a reason, you know, because they allow anybody to come up there and say terrible poetry or sing horrible songs, or worse, cover good songs poorly, you know, but I do believe that everybody should have access to art at any level, and so I feel like that's the one thing that I have. Like, if you want to come in and spend, like, you can get a small drawing for me for less than $100, like, at any point, typically, like, you know, and that's, you know, and I feel like, you know, and I think that that's important. Or you can get a small work from somebody who maybe you wouldn't be able to afford something large, but it doesn't diminish in quality. You know, like, I remember being at an art fair once, and I saw these Gerhard Richters, and they were these tiny little Gerhard Richters, and they were like the postcard size things with the paint, streak on it or whatever, and they were like $34,000. And I thought, what a freaking loser of a buy. You know what I mean? Like, that is terrible. Like, what a waste. I mean, because that's not Gerhard Richter's work. You know what I mean? Like, that's a little tiny scrap of something that, people bought. I mean, they bought them all. There was like 6 or 8 in the booth, and they all sold. But, it's kind of like, that's not what that work's meant to be. That work was made to be affordable, but it's still like a boatload. You know what I mean? Like, and I think like, and to me, like, that's sad a little bit, because I think that like, man, who was that woman who wrote the Art of Collecting Art or whatever it is, the mixed greens lady? What was her name?
I don't know.
You know what I'm talking about, though?
I feel like I just read something about this person. Isn't she lecturing? Isn't she at the Pecha Kucha thing they're having at the City Hall?
I don't know.
Okay.
But I can't remember her name. Perhaps
maybe we can put it along
the follow-up. We can Paige West.
Okay.
That's it. We could get a Google here.
Yeah, I was going for it.
Okay. Paige West, I think that's her name. And she addresses this thing. She actually came out to, it was either the first or I think it was the second CAD fair that we put on. We brought her out to we did like some panel type thing, or like speaker type things like at the fair.
That's where I read it, because I've been looking through your file when I was...
and she like mentions this thing about like, look, if you're going to buy something, buy the best example of an artist's work, and I think that like, and like that's the way to go about doing it, like, and so I like that really stuck with me, and I thought like, okay, if we're going to do small works, we just have to make sure that they're really good, like, and that if we're going to do editions, which that became like a huge thing. That's like still the biggest thing in terms of like when people think of us, that's one of the things that they think of. And an edition for us can take any form. Like, it doesn't have to be just a print or whatever. I mean, it could be like a, a small run book, or, a print, or a t-shirt, or a toy, or whatever. It could be a placemat. I don't know. Like, I mean, it could be anything. But whatever it is, it makes sense. And it's a good representation. It's not like a step down. It's just something different, like, and I feel like that's one of the things that I've always been really committed to from, the first print edition that we ever did, which was a Dalek and Mike Giant thing. I knew like not many people were going to be able to afford that work, even though that work was extremely affordable at the time, but I still figured like it's probably not going to be a lot of people dropping, $650 or whatever, so this thing's $40 and we'll do that. And, and that was how it went down, and I think that was that was like one of the things that I thought like, okay, I've always got to do this, because I feel like this is something that I strongly believe in, and I think that like, I mean, and my output in that area is massive, probably. I feel like that's the thing that might compensate from times where, like the exhibition schedule is running a little slower than, what we would like, or what everybody else would like it to be, or whatever, if everybody else wants me to do 10 shows a year and I do 6, but hey, I just released, a dozen limited edition things this year. What did your favorite 10 show year gallery do? Like, and I feel good about that, so I think that that's like super important. I mean, to have not only like prints and things like that are super affordable, but also have like original work that's really affordable and can be an entry point for anybody, whether that's a high school kid or a young professional, or somebody who might be super wealthy that's just getting started collecting art. I mean, that's like it's a daunting thing if you like decide like, okay, I'm gonna start collecting art, because like it's avoiding the collecting bad art or collecting overpriced things that really have no value, like things like that. I mean, I can see it, like I used to not really understand that, like, but that would be scary, because it's possible you could drop $1 million on a bunch of art that's worthless, like, and do it rather quickly. So
a couple of years ago, you and James Cope came together and put together Pop-Up 310.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering if you can tell us about what was the impetus for that gallery and what were your hopes for that space?
Some lady that James knew somebody at the West Village, like in the leasing side, and that space Gardens is like a big store, you know, with like decorative home items and expensive nickel-plated shovels or whatever, you know, like went out of business. And actually it was kind of sad, like, you know, they lost both their stores. I think it was like a huge, like, sort of financial storm that they could not weather. And so they had this massive vacancy, and that space is huge. I mean, it's so big, you know, and so they just had this sort of big, giant, you know, like nothing, like, I mean, the only people that could come in at full boat and take on a space like that is going to be like a huge corporate thing. But, you know, like West Village kind of had, you know, Banana Republic and Gap and people who could fill a space like that, you know, and be able to take it on. So like the thought of like just a, you know, individual, like independent retailer coming in there just was like, unless they're willing to give them the space at like pennies on the dollar or something, it's just not gonna happen. So they're like, we should do something, you know. And so they said to us, like, would you guys want to come and just like hang some work in the window or whatever, you know? And I thought, like, no, like, because these windows are probably crap, and so you're basically like, do you want to come and sun bleach a bunch of stuff? You know, and so we just said, like, why don't you just let us have the space for, you know, like, let's figure out an amount of time. So they said, okay, it was like February to June, and you guys can come in and do whatever. And so the Dallas Art Fair was that year. It was like the second year of the fair, and I had exhibited in the fair, so I basically just like took everything and just like moved it over into that space. You know, I thought like it's perfect time. So you know, we got the you know, we got the power turned on. But the crazy thing was, it was that week of that crazy ice storm. That was like insane. That shut the city down. So
during the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah. So we had planned. We had planned to have our grant, and it had already been set, you know, because they were talking to us like well before that. So we were like, okay, we'll just go from Dallas Art Fair, we'll move the stuff in here, we'll get stuff on the walls, we'll get product. You know, they had this big long island counter thing that was just like, gosh, it must have been like 60 feet long or maybe longer than that. And you know, we filled it up with like books and T-shirts, and you know, like basically I just like emptied like any inventory of anything like that I had and brought it there. And so that week we were scheduled to get our power on, but we couldn't get the power turned on. They just were like, sorry, we have so much emergency stuff, we're not going to be able to do that. I mean, we had inspectors coming out because we had to get a CO and everything. So the inspectors were coming, and you know, they're going through like doing their inspections, and we've got all our green cards and we're ready to go, and we can't get the power company to come out. So the opening is going to happen. So we actually rented a generator and then got these like construction lights and ran the generator out the back door. And there was actually a plug. You know how they have like lights and trees? There was like a plug like in the tree, like right in front of the space. So we like ran 2 lights from that plug. And then we had the generator lights in the back. And we actually had a pretty, you know, it was like not too bad. It's like, you know, those tripod, you know, like 2 halogens, you know, we had like 4 of those set up in each of the corners. And we got like those little moon lights, you know, for the bathroom. So we just like put the batteries in them and just turn them on, and it was like this very ambient, you know, kind of lighting in the bathroom. And we threw the craziest party. Like, I mean, it was nuts, man. We had 2 DJ friends of mine who are like, you know, total party rockers. Like, we had like a stage in there. It was I mean, it was like that actually to me felt like more like a return to like the art prostitute days for sure, you know, where and it was very much like in the tradition of Angstrom, like where openings eventually parlay themselves into massive parties, you know, like, and that was, you know, and that was kind of what this was, you know. I mean, like everybody was there, like, you know, like, I mean, obviously like with James there, you know, you have like, you know, he was still at the Goss Michael Foundation at that time, like, so we had the Goss Michael people there, we had my people there, we had like, you know, all these like hipsters and I mean, it was a scene, you know, like, and we did that for like a few months, you know, like we did all kinds of stuff. Like I produced like a live print edition one night, you know, it was like, we had a party just for that, so I like did like a 3-color print like in front of everybody, and then at the end when I was done, like it took me about an hour and a half. We did like an edition of 50, and we just like started selling them off, you know, like right after I was finished, you know. It was cool. Like, I mean, it was and that was like, to me, like that was a pretty reinvigorating time, you know, because I mean, you kind of, you know, as a dealer and all that stuff and culture person or whatever, like you definitely get like, you know, a little down, you know, here and there. You just sort of, you know, lose some steam, and I felt like that was kind of like something that made me realize that, okay, cool, like people still care, you know, so it's still worth doing.
So you've been on the Dallas arts scene or a part of the community for nearly a decade at this point.
Yeah.
And do you have any insights as to the current status of the Dallas arts community, and if and how that's changed since you emerged from UNT in 2002?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I mean, obviously, like Christina Reese, you know, she wrote that State of the Arts
Union
or whatever.
Or something,
yeah. And she said some things in there that I guess, like, you know, I somewhat agreed with. But it was also kind of like, you know, for me, like, I don't know, I mean, like, those are things that you talk about, but maybe you don't say because it's not very productive to say. But, you know, I kind of feel like maybe I'm starting to see this, I don't know, but I feel like in the last couple of years, like, I've been exposed, like, whether it's through, you know, my affiliation with 2x2 in terms of, like, donating work or whatever, you know, I do, you know, like, the handful of things for work on a few initiatives with the Gospel Michael Foundation and stuff like that, where I'm around these people who, like, could make this massive difference and aren't super collectors like Howard and Cindy or anything like that. Like, I think that what Howard and Cindy do is perfectly fine. Like, and I have like absolutely, I mean, I think that they do Dallas a massive service in terms of, you know, I mean, they've basically like opened what once was their home and probably is no longer their home because it is now this, you know, like, and all the stuff they've done for the museum and things like that. Like, you know, I think that to, you know, wag the finger at them for not supporting local galleries seems silly to me, you know, and not something that I really want to get involved with, you know. Yeah, it'd be cool to see them out more or whatever, but they're busy. I get it, you know, like, but I feel like there are people that, you know, it's kind of like their peers and then their peers' peer, you know, like, you know, maybe, you know, it's kind of like this sort of, you know, like, not like a trickle down or anything like that, but just like, you know, just people who know people who, you know, like that kind of thing, who become interested in contemporary art and don't realize, like, and then immediately gravitate towards what the Howards and Cindys are doing, or what the Eagles are doing and things like that, because they know somebody, or they know them, or they know somebody who knows them or whatever, and not realizing that there is this really great, like, and I wouldn't even call what we have in Dallas now provincial anymore by any stretch. Like, it's just not. You know, I mean, I think that the internet kind of makes that impossible. You know, like, it's not like it used to be, you know, like where you're just showing people and, you know, like, you know, and a print press was the main way of getting stuff out, you know, like, I mean, we're in this new, I mean, not even really new, but I mean, like, I feel like information, the ability to disseminate it very quickly is still evolving and still going, you know, like, and so I think that, like, we can do more with outside artists, international artists. We can, like, create more opportunities for our artists abroad, things like that, that sort of make us, like, I mean, you know, I think about, like, really how I don't know most of the people now that a lot of the galleries in Dallas are showing, or at least I don't know as many as I used to. And that's not, you know, and it's because they've expanded their rosters and they're working with artists who are, you know, from all different parts. And I think what's going on at Central Track, I mean, so I feel like people don't really realize, like, how kind of national and international Dallas galleries and residencies and things like that are becoming, and we're right here, you know, and so I think that there's going to be more people realizing that, at least I hope, and, you know, and I hope that that translates into to more people coming in and supporting galleries, you know, and supporting artists that are from here, and also supporting artists that aren't from here, because I feel like, you know, an artist that's from New York that comes and shows in Dallas, and if they do well, then that goes back to New York. And if they do poorly, then they go, ah, you know what, man, Dallas just isn't New York, you know, like, and I think that if we can, and I also think that I feel like there's probably going to be less trophy hunting and things like that as a result of this, because I don't feel like artists are sending lower tier work out to, you know, less desirable markets or anything like that. I feel like the work is as strong as artists that have shown in New York, that I've seen shows in New York of theirs, and when I see their show here in Dallas, I feel the same, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think like, no, this is totally their studio remnants or anything like that. And I think that that's something that I really want, that I hope people really catch on to, and I think that that's starting to happen. I mean, next month I'm doing a show with, like, an edition show with Shepard Fairey, which is great, because it's like, you know, Shepard's such a huge, like, international person. Obviously, like, his time here with the Contemporary and all that, like, really raised a lot of awareness for him. But the great thing about what we're doing is, like, we're presenting a show of edition works, so I'm not trotting out the $25,000 20 by 30 paintings or whatever, you know, or the $100,000 8 by 12s, or, you know what I mean? Like, it's like basically things that are going to be in that, you know, $2,000 to $3,200 range largely, like, and it's actually good work. It's, you know what I mean? But it's like, it's part of that democracy type thing. So I'm actually really interested to see how Dallas is going to react to it, because I know that I'll likely sell the show out, and I know that he's got an audience that's just waiting, and that I've never spoken to or talked to ever. So it's like, it's possible they could just come in and just scoop everything up. But I'm hoping that Dallas will be like, wow, you know, like, and, you know, and I'm hoping to maybe, like, forge new relationships, like, on a local level with that. And, you know, and I think that, you know, if that happens, then, you know, I feel like what I'm sort of feel like I'm seeing happening is, you know, maybe actually happening. So.
Can you describe any of your most memorable exhibitions put up, either Art Prostitute, Public Trust, Pop-Up 310? Are there any that kind of stand out in your mind as being memorable for any kind of reason, not just financially successful? Which
yeah, no, that hardly weighs into it. Yeah, I think, like, memorable, obviously the first real show we had was a two-person show with Rich Jacobs and Richard Coleman. It was called How Rich Can You Get? That was a pretty big deal. We brought both the artists out. They, like, did these, because we've always done a lot of site-specific stuff that was always in support of what else was happening in the show. So, you know, they did mural, like Richard Coleman did this amazing mural on the wall, and, you know, Rich Jacobs, you know, followed suit on his side of the gallery, and, you know, that was pretty huge. I think the Dalek and Mike Giant show was pretty big. Evan Hecox and Cody Hudson, first show they had with him, like, to me, like, that was a, you know, Evan was, I mean, obviously, like, Evan being the first, like, you know, it was kind of like, if I had one artist I could interview, that would have been it, and I got that, like, right out of the gate, and that was just great. And so to have him there to do a gallery show was even better, you know. We sold most of the work. That was cool, you know, like, so I felt like, wow, that was worth his time. Awesome. And then I feel like Dave Kinsey, when, you know, he opened our space here in Dallas, like, that was a really huge deal. He came out and did these great painted murals, like, you know, that was a great show. You know, I feel like, gosh, I just sort of think, like, you know, and I think, like, lately, like, the show that we did over the summer with Milan Nguyen, like, you know, she, you know, built that big house in the middle of the gallery, like, that to me, like, it's probably been one of my favorite things, like, seeing Billy Zinzer's, like, gigantic inflatable macrodon happen, you know, from the Kimbrough grant that he got from you guys. That was cool. That's been so many things. I mean, I feel like they're always generally centered around, like, some kind of temporary thing, and I feel like that kind of goes back to the good bad thing, you know, like, sort of seeing, like, you know, that what can happen in one night, or what can happen, you know, in 4 weeks, and then it's gone, you know, like, we have pictures of things, but the thing is no longer there. I can touch where it used to be, but it's not there. I mean, I think that those are the things that seem to always stick out in my mind. You know, when it's just like, you know, when it's work on the walls or whatever, like I feel like less, you know, like, you know, I feel less attached to it, you know. I mean, I really appreciate the kind of temporary type things. Like Micah Yarbrough used to do these like drawings on flash paper.
What's flash paper?
It's like things that magicians use, you know, when they go, you know, and the paper and disappears. And it was on a timer. He was one of the good bad guys. And it was on a timer, and the timer would spark, and then the drawing would just go away. You know, so it'd be like, I mean, it was amazing. It was so good. Like, you know, like think of like that type of stuff. You know, like those types of things really had a big influence on me. So I feel like when I talk about the gallery, like those are always the things that stand out. You know, it's like with Evan and Cody, like, you know, we did like a letterpress and like skateboard like set, you know, like things like, you know, like just that. There was always like, there always seems to be some type of object that, you know, is like, you know, something that we produce as a, you know, I don't know, like as much for other people as for us, you know, to kind of commemorate these things that we're doing. But yeah, I think those are some of the highlights for sure.
And how about, are there any memorable shows that you've seen or gone to in Dallas that you didn't have any part of, but maybe were influential to your own?
Yeah, Jill Foley, that show that she did at Conduit with when she made that cave out of the FedEx boxes turned inside out. She did an installation here too, but that thing was incredible. That was by far the most exciting and memorable thing that I've seen at anyone else's gallery. Like, that's still, like, I think about that, like, at least once a month. You know, and I feel like, you know, and that's why, you know, when, you know, we did the thing with Milan, like, I felt like that space was, you know, like, like, didn't transform the gallery like she did, but it was like, you could go into this thing that you are now no longer in the gallery anymore. You know what I mean? And, like, and I feel like in a small way, like, you know, I kind of, you know, sort of, I mean, that definitely, like, my desire to do something like that surely stemmed from seeing that piece of Jill's at Conduit. That thing was so cool. God, it was awesome. And she did like readings that, you know, I mean, there's like kind of like this sort of schedule of happenings, you know, like, it was amazing. Nancy Whiteneck is like super good in that way. She's so good. She's definitely like one of my favorites. Like her and Barry, like, I'll just listen to whatever they have to say, like, all the time.
When you were a youngin' coming out of UNT, were you aware of any kind of scene going on in Dallas as far as the arts were considered? Well,
I mean, you know, like Conduit. Like, you know, because it's like, I found out about Conduit because of Robert Jessup. You know, there's like a postcard on his door if he was having a show there. And I go, man, because I always loved Robert Jessup. Like, I loved his work. Especially when it was like really, you know, figurative and, you know, but it had like that great like style to it, you know, like, and his paint application was so amazing. But yeah, like Conduit for sure. Obviously like Dunn and Brown, or now Tallydon Gallery, whatever. Like, you know, I mean, you know, because they were showing like, and even Gerald Peters, you know, like when Tally was at Gerald Peters, like Trendle Hancock, the stuff he did there, like I feel, you know, like that was pretty influential. You know, I was fortunate to see a lot of stuff, but I think at the time I didn't really realize what I was looking at. You know, obviously the stuff at Angstrom, like seeing Swenson's first show, with the glacier and the monkeys and the snow, like that was pretty incredible. Yeah, so I think that definitely those people. I mean, like Barry, Nancy, Tally, you know, that David Quadrini. That was probably like the thing that was, you know, it was small, but I feel like it was a really good. Like at the time, I feel like it was the best that Dallas had to offer. You know, now it's, you know, I mean, I really like Marty Walker. I think she does a great job. But yeah.
So shifting gears, along with your role as an accomplished curator and gallery owner, you're also an artist. So how long have you been practicing artist in Dallas?
I guess like since the beginning. You know, we were always making things. You know what I mean? Like, you know, people that we knew in California or whatever would be like having a show, so they'd like send a piece off. You know, like for me, like, I think the production has been, like, you know, like, printmaking was something that I wasn't trained in. I just taught myself how to do, like, working with a couple of screen printers, you know. Obviously, like, you know, that's been a huge part of, like, what we've done, like, edition-wise and stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's just been kind of, like, for me, it's more or less, like, something that I do. You know, like, I just do, like, and I'm not really concerned about where it's going or anything. It always seems to find homes and whatever, and people seem to enjoy it. I mean, I should probably take it more seriously, you know, because I've had, like, you know, when I've tried, I've had, you know, like a decent amount of success, an encouraging amount of success in that way. But, you know, I think that it's probably just more or less like getting it together and actually doing it. But at the same time, like, I feel like, you know, like, I think that there's I feel like it's always about the bigger mark that you can make, you know, and so I don't know, like, I feel like in that, to pursue that, like, with the full head of steam and all, I mean, I just think that my focus is, like, really split, but it's, like, very intentionally split, you know, and, like, sometimes things get more attention than others, but I don't necessarily feel like, you know, the individual pursuit is as rewarding as everything else. You know, like, I think I like it better when, you know, when I have a hand in making something happen for a city or a handful of other, you know what I mean? Like, that kind of thing. Like, that's, you know, to me, like, I'm sure that if I wanted to, you know, like, I could just, like, stop all that and just, like, pay, you know, just, and probably, you know, make a lot of noise. But I don't know that I want to yet, you know? And I think that there's time, and I'm not really interested in, like, you know, you know, I mean, it's like, I don't know, like the individual superstardom or whatever, you know, obviously that, you know, I mean, I've had a small taste of, you know, kind of large recognition, and it was fine, it was fun, but I don't know, I feel like that sort of thing is, like, I feel like that sort of thing is a bit fleeting, and then you sort of get into this, like, you set into this, like, groove, and then you just become, like, consistent and productive and all that stuff, you know. But I would rather be that for a lot of things, you know, like, as opposed to just myself. So it's kind of weird to talk about.
Well, have you ever been part of an artist community or a collective?
Yeah, you know, like, currently, you know, I guess a couple of years ago, like, some guys that I knew who worked at a print, like, I worked under contract for, like a screen printing company for a year, working on a couple of apparel projects with them and stuff like that, and met, like, a group of artists. Like, one, you know, when they hired me, they were like, yeah, we need a person in production, so I hired one of the artists that I represent, and then I feel like that, you know, like, all of us there, you know, it was like this guy Taro, who I had no idea, like, I mean, he was like a good designer, you know, like, you know, but then I, like, just saw, like, he had just a book of drawings that he had done, and they were incredible, like, they were insane. And this dude has a degree in economics from UTA, and he's better than most people, you know, like, and it's just like, and he's got, you know, really no formal art training or anything like that, and it was just insane. I was like, whoa, you know, and so I was like, do you want to do a show sometime, you know? And so, like, a year or so ago, we did a 2-person show with him, and then he just had a solo show at the gallery. But, you know, we all kind of were in this space, and so we sort of kind of came up with this thing called Lunch Buddies, and it was just like a total joke. I mean, because we had lunch together all the time. So, but then it sort of came to, like, us doing stuff for people, you know, like doing posters and, you know, like being, you know, and then being part of, like, the, you know, production of a larger event or whatever, you know, whether that was, like, us doing, like, live printing or whatever it was, you know. And so, yeah, I think that, you know, that's, like, kind of that's, like, really the first time it's ever really happened, you know. I'm sure it could have happened, but it was, like most things, I think that when they happen just kind of on their own without saying, like, I am going to do X, like, we didn't realize, like, that it was actually going to become a thing, you know. But yeah, that's been really good, I guess. Like, you know, because it's nice to, you know, have a handful of people, you know, that you're constantly in touch with creatively, and, you know, you're sort of, you know, sharing ideas with and things like that. So that's kind of that's trending towards.
What have you found to be the greatest challenge to having a career in Dallas?
I mean, I guess like it's, you know, really the thing that I'm constantly struggling with, I guess, is just to, you know, translate. I mean, like, obviously, like, to having a career, you have to, I mean, you have to, you know, I mean, there's got to be, like, I mean, there's got to be money, you know, like, I mean, it's just, especially if you're trying to do things, and I think that, for me, it's the thing that I find that I'm always struggling with is kind of translating the things that, you know, I'm doing to, you know, kind of like sustainable, significant, like financial sort of success so that I can continue to do these things, you know, like, and I think that, you know, that's kind of the thing that I feel like I've, like with CAD, for instance, like most people don't know that I produce like every single thing that CAD puts out, whether it's a postcard or an art guide or an ad in a magazine or whatever, you know, like, and, you know, maybe like that's something that I was fine with for a while, but I feel like if I'm going to continue to sort of be like this, you know, cultural whatever.
Art elf.
Yeah, the art elf. If I'm going to continue my career as an art elf, I have to get a big bag of dust to sprinkle on everybody, you know. But yeah, I mean, I think that, yeah, that's a, so I guess it's like sort of taking those things and really like, and so I think that that's something that I need to just actually start working on, you know, to like get people to kind of put everything in one place and go, I did that, the whole thing, you know, you know what I mean, and like, and then maybe people go, whoa, we need this guy to do these things, you know, and I think that that's starting to happen, you know, like, but I need to make a better effort, and I feel like that's the thing that's gonna keep me trucking in the elf area.
Where do you go to look at art?
Galleries. I feel like, you know, that's like spot number one.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think that you know, I feel like museums, you know, I go to museums more to sort of like appreciate like what someone has done, and galleries are for me to sort of see what people are doing, you know, like, and I think that like, you know, and so, you know, I don't think that, you know, it's like, you know, museums to me are like the end game, you know, like how cool would that be to like I don't know how Tally Dunn feels. It must be crazy. Like, you know, like, I mean, she's like Miss Museum stuff, you know, like every second I turn around, oh, we're doing this museum, you know, or whatever, like, and that's not really happened for me. But then again, I gotta remember, like, you know, she's got crazy years on me, you know what I mean? Like, it's like she worked for Gerald Peters for a really long time and then have 10 plus on her own. But when she went out on her own, it was like she was our, you know what I mean? Like, and it's just sort of like, I don't even know what that would be like, you know, but I guarantee you, like, it would be insane, you know, like, because it's like, what, you know, and so I kind of, like, I don't know, I mean, I think about that, like, sort of all the time, like, what would that, you know, what would that be like to work with that sort of what I view as, like, the in-game piece, you know, on a regular basis, you know, so I feel like museums are, like, things that, you know, I sort of aspire to, but, like, galleries are, like, the things that, you know, kind of keep me going. I mean, obviously, you know, and then, you know, when you can't travel and see stuff as much as you used to, or you just kind of don't, you know, I mean, like, you know, when I go to New York or whatever, it's like, you know, I'll go to, but, you know, that's another thing too. It's like you go to all the super blue chip galleries and you're like, oh, this is what I like, you know, like, you know, and like, you know, it's like you're at Matthew Mark's and then you know, like shoot over to Gagosian, one of their mini spaces, you know, like that kind of thing, and like, you know, and that sort of kind of gets me like a little amped, but kind of in a ridiculous sort of way, like, whoa, man. You know, like it's like the winning the lottery of the art world or something. Like, this is what you would do if all of a sudden you had $150 million, you know, like, you know, and so I think that like it's kind of a combination of those things. Like, you know, I have such huge respect for, you know, like museums that have great programming and stuff like that, and you know, and that you know, kind of keeps me really, you know, that keeps me motivated to like, you know, hopefully like, you know, like work towards being a part of that. But I always have to remember, like, you know, I'm the age now that some of the people were when they started all this, you know, and I've been doing it for a while, you know, so it's like I gotta, and I also have to remember that there is, you know, people look at that, you know, like, they look at, you know, like, he's 35, what could he know? You know, or, you know, I mean, that's like a deal. It was like when Jacob Lewis, like, you know, when Pace Prints, like, you know, really kind of went at their new gallery and all that stuff, and Jacob Lewis was, you know, the guy that was going to lead it, and everybody was like, what? You know, he was like this wonder kid kind of thing, you know, and I really identified with that, you know, and it's like, I know Jacob, like, we've talked, you know, it's like, you know, we've talked about that very thing, you know, like, and, you know, so it's kind of like this, you know, it's a bit of a credibility thing that you really have to, especially the younger you are, the harder you have to fight for it, you know, and so I hope that, you know, maybe at some point, like, I'll have to stop fighting for it and we can get down to making some awesome things happen. I don't know.
All right, I have one last question for you, and it's kind of a doozy, and I didn't prepare you like I have for other people in the past.
That's fine.
But if you can you give us maybe your greatest memory or favorite story in relation to kind of the contemporary arts community in Dallas?
Man, I don't know. Like, in what way? Like,
it can be as generic or narrow as you'd like. But I guess we're kind of looking for sound bites mostly, but something that, I think something not so generic as, this was my favorite exhibition, but maybe a story that when you think about Dallas, you're like, oh gosh, that moment really makes me laugh, or that moment really represents a lot of what I'm looking to have as far as a career in Dallas. Or
I mean, I definitely think that moment with Nancy was like pretty huge for me. But I think like, you know, having like, and it's a privilege for sure, to have been asked to like be, you know, a part of the Contemporary Art Dealers of Dallas, like, to me, like, which represents like the best galleries, you know, like in this community. Like, you know, at the time, I really don't think I had any business in that room. You know, it was like I had a gallery in Denton for a couple of years. You know, it was like it was a good space, but it wasn't like polished. I mean, it wasn't like, you know, super lo-fi or anything, but like, you know, I just kind of gotten here, like, and I was sort of figuring the whole thing out. But I feel like the level of acceptance that I've gotten based on, like, I don't know, like just how, you know, young I am, like in the scope of things. I mean, I don't feel young anymore, but you know, I mean, like having the opportunity to work with 2x2, and, you know, even though like, you know, I'm contributing works, you know, which are, you know, kind of smaller works or, you know, less expensive or whatever, the fact that like year in and year out they asked me to do that, and I always seem to, you know, like either, you know, and not really forget, but like that sort of gets, it's always in the summer when they're asking, and that's always a time where I'm trying to figure out what the hell I'm doing in the fall, you know, like, or whatever, like, you know, but the fact that I'm always in the mix at things like that, and you know, and that they're always so you know, it's sort of grateful for this contribution, and I sort of, you know, like I feel like in, you know, in a way, like I don't know, like, I mean, I'm just really thankful for that type of stuff, because I mean, whereas I've done a lot of things, like, you know, I mean, like, it's not been like some giant, big, huge, you know, retrospective of, you know, whatever, you know, like, you know, it's not like I'm having like, you know, these crazy blue, you know what I mean? Like, I just feel like to be in that company, you know, where, you know, like I'm showing my peer group, basically, and I've always done that. That was something that somebody told me a long time ago, you know, like, just show artists in your peer group and grow together and you'll be fine, you know, like, and I feel like that's sort of what I've done and continue to do. And, you know, I think people, I don't know, like, I mean, it's cool because I really respect all those people, you know, like, I really respect, like, you know, Nancy Whitenack and Barry Whistler and, you know, like Howard and Cindy and things like that, and, you know, and they want to hear what I have to say, you know, like, and I'm thinking, like, man, that's crazy, like, you're who you are, you know, like, I'm just a dude, you know, like, you know, that's, I mean, but maybe, like, and, you know, on everybody else sort of looking at on the outside in, you know, maybe that's not the case. You know, like, but me, how I feel and how, you know, I relate to them, you know, like it was the neatest thing when, you know, like Nancy bought something from me, you know, like that was such a huge moment. And Laura Elcock bought something from me, and like, and I know what they have purchased, you know, like, and it's like, you know, I'm a part of that now. Like that's crazy, you know, like, and, you know, so, you know, I hope that maybe there's, you know, there's more of that. But I mean, I feel like I'm at a point now where, you know, that's it's kind of like Dallas as it's happening right now is the thing that, you know, I'm sort of most fond of, you know, and it's like just being in this moment, you know, because I don't know how long this is going to last, you know. It's like I hope it lasts forever, but I'm not sure, you know. So, I mean, I guess if that answers your question.
It does. Thank you so much.
Cool. All right.
This was really great. Thank
Cool.
you very much.
Yeah.